Montana Territory, January, 1889. Winter held the high valley the way a fist holds a nail, tight, cold, unyielding. Snow pressed against the pines in old, deep drifts. A man could hear his own heartbeat in weather like that. Inside a one-room cabin perched on the ridge above a creek, Eamon Pike sat by the iron stove, slicing venison with slow, deliberate strokes. Silence lived there with him, solid as timber, sharp as memory. He trusted it more than he trusted most men. Then the storm changed its voice. Under the wind's long howl came a thin, torn sound, a cry. Eamon froze. Breath paused, knife mid-cut. Another cry, weak, distant, fading into the white. He set the meat aside, pulled on his coat, lifted the lantern, and stepped into the knife-cold dark. Snow struck him sideways, hard as thrown sand. The storm tried to erase the world, but he pushed into it with the stubborn patience only lonely men learn. He followed the sound along the fence line, posts rising and vanishing like gravestones. By the second bend, he saw a shape half buried in a drift. A woman collapsed, winter pressing down on her as if it meant to keep her. Eamon knelt beside her. Her skin was the color of old wax, her dress frozen stiff. Breath barely stirred her chest. "Easy," he murmured. "Stay with me." He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, just cold, wrapped in cloth. He grabbed the carpet bag with his free hand, knocking the snow off in one rough shake. Whatever was inside thudded lightly. Clothes, maybe enough for a woman to make a life she hadn't yet reached. He slung it over his shoulder. "Storms don't choose men," he muttered through the wind. "Men choose in storms." He carried her back toward the cabin, leaning into the gale. Lantern light swung wild across the snow. Fence, drift, door, each landmark found by memory more than sight. Inside, he set her near the stove, peeled away the ice-stiff fabric, and wrapped her in every blanket he had. Heat from the iron stove began the slow work of pulling her back. Color returned by inches. Breath steadied, fragile but present. Eamon sat beside her, back against the bedpost, listening to the rise and fall of her chest. Winter had delivered her into his hands. The land had its own ways of testing a man tonight. It had chosen this one. The storm eased toward morning. Thin light crept through the frost-filmed window, faint as a promise. The woman stirred beneath the blankets. Eamon watched her eyes blink open, green, searching, startled by the warmth around her. She tried to rise, but her strength failed, and he steadied her with a careful hand on her shoulder. "You're safe from the storm," he said. Her gaze drifted around the cabin, axe by the door, drying herbs hanging from a beam, patched quilt on the bunk, a Bible worn white along the spine. It took her a moment to place herself in the world again. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Pike Place," he said. "Ridge above Alder Creek, 3 miles west of Whitford Land." Fear flickered across her face, quick but sharp. She forced it away with a swallow. She looked down at the flannel shirt he'd put on her. A flush of embarrassment touched her cheeks. "Your dress was ice," Eamon said quietly. Heat mattered more. She nodded once. "My name is Rosalind Hale." Eamon Pike. A silence settled, brief, but heavy with all the questions she was not yet strong enough to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of the road behind her. "I came west to marry Garrett Whitford." Eamon's jaw tightened. A small shift, but not a subtle one. A crack in otherwise steady stone. Rosalind went on, her voice thin from cold and memory. "He met me at the stage, looked at me as if I were stock he hadn't ordered, said I was thinner than he expected, softer, unfit for a ranch winter." She looked toward the stove, the fire's orange glow warming only the front of her face. He told me to walk to town, storm coming, no escort. Eamon stirred the fire, sparks lifting. A man who leaves a woman in rising weather chooses wrong. Her eyes lifted toward him, slow, uncertain, as if she expected judgment and didn't find it. Something loosened in her expression, subtle but real. "You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head. "The storm brought you. I just opened my door." But he knew it wasn't that simple, and she could see the truth of it in the tightness along his jaw. Color returned gradually to her cheeks. Her breathing steadied. Silence wrapped around them again, not empty, but waiting. Outside, the wind began its long, low retreat across the ridge. Inside, the distance between two strangers quietly shortened. The storm held them 3 full days. The world shrank to firelight, kettle steam, and the long hiss of wind against the logs. Rosalind slept in heavy stretches, rising slow, steadier with each waking. Eamon moved around her with the quiet care of a man unused to caring for anyone, yet unwilling to leave a single need unmet. On the second day, she tried to stand. She made it 2 steps before her knees buckled. She'd managed a few spoonfuls of broth that morning, but her strength had not yet caught up to her will. Eamon caught her before she fell. "I can stand," she whispered, breath thin. "You will," he said. "Winter takes its toll." Something in his voice, low, roughened with worry, slipped past her defenses. She turned away, unsettled by warmth she hadn't felt from another person in a long while. They settled into a rhythm without meaning to. He chopped wood outside, returning with flakes of snow in his beard. She stirred the pot when her strength allowed, the steam warming her face. He melted snow for water. She mended the torn seam of his shirt with slow, careful stitches. Her hands only trembled when she thought he wasn't looking. Silence lived between them, but it no longer felt hollow. It listened. It breathed. That evening she caught him pausing at the door before stepping into the cold to check the barn. Just standing there, hand resting on the latch, shoulders tense, breath held, as if afraid that, in the space of a few minutes, she might be gone. The sight of it shook something deep inside her. A truth she'd been avoiding rose all at once. No one had feared losing her for a very long time. She spoke it aloud, barely above a breath. "I haven't felt safe in a room for years." He heard her. She knew from the way his hand tightened on the latch, but he didn't turn or push for more. Outside, a drift of snow slid off the roof with a soft thud. Inside, the fire cracked, warm and steady. On the third evening, wind brushed the cabin walls like a warning. Rosalind watched flakes dance past the narrow window. "When this storm breaks," she said quietly, "he will come." Eamon added a log to the stove. Sparks jumped. "Storms don't choose men," he said. "Men choose in storms." She closed her eyes, not from fear, but from understanding that the next storm would not be made of snow. Something was shifting between them, not sudden, not spoken, but sure as winter giving way to thaw. The storm broke by dawn. The world outside lay still and white, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. Eamon shoveled a path to the barn, each stroke measured. Rosalind stood wrapped in a blanket at the doorway, watching him with tired steadiness. "It looks peaceful," she said. "Peace just means the storm's busy somewhere else," Eamon replied. Hoofbeats cut through the morning. Eamon felt a tightening in his chest, a brief tremor he locked down before it could grow. He stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Rosalind and the sound. 3 riders came up the slope. Garrett Whitford led them, coat dark against the snow, posture rigid with pride. 2 ranch hands followed, their eyes shifting with unease. Whitford stopped short of the shoveled path, studying the cabin as if appraising a piece of land he meant to dispute. "Pike," he said, "seems you found something of mine." Eamon kept still. "Found a woman dying at my fence. Nothing about that belonged to anyone." Whitford's jaw tensed. "She was my contracted bride." Rosalind stepped onto the porch, the blanket trailing across the boards. "You left me," she said, "in a storm you knew was coming." Whitford didn't look at her when he answered. A strong woman would have made the walk. His voice cracked on the word strong, small, but enough to reveal fear hidden under the weight of his pride. "You told me to walk to town alone," Rosalind said. "No escort, no care if I survived." Whitford's cheeks reddened. "A man's reputation matters. You expect me to bring home a bride who can't handle a bit of weather?" Eamon's tone hardened. "Storms don't choose men. Men choose in storms. You chose to abandon her." Whitford leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Step aside." "No." The word landed like a beam dropped into place. Whitford's hands twitched on the reins. "You'll regret crossing me." Eamon didn't blink. "Not for this." Whitford opened his mouth as if searching for another threat, another angle. Anything that might restore the power slipping from him. But nothing came. He jerked his horse around, pride flaring hotter than sense. Snow churned under hooves as he vanished into the trees, his men following with uncertain glances. Rosalind watched until the last flicker of coat disappeared. Eamon didn't look at her. His breath shook once before he steadied it. The storm had passed, but trouble had not. Some winds were only beginning. Alder Ridge felt smaller than usual, drawn in tight, like a body bracing for a blow. Eamon drove the wagon with Rosalind beside him, her posture straight despite the cold working through her bones. The general store was warm but not welcoming. Conversations thinned to nothing when they stepped inside. Lantern light flickered across faces turning sharp with curiosity. Mrs. Trumbley stood behind the counter, ledger open. "Morning," she said, voice thin. "Morning," Eamon answered. "Coffee, flour, lamp oil boots for Miss Hale." Rosalind added softly, "I can pay." Two men near the nail barrels exchanged glances. Whitford's cast off. One muttered. "Pike's taken her in," another replied. "Man's asking for trouble." Rosalind's breath caught, small, quick, the kind of hurt a person tries to bury before it shows. She faced the goods on the shelves, jaw set tight. Mrs. Trumbley wrapped their supplies without a word about the whispers. Her gaze flicked to Rosalind once. Something like pity, muted by fear of being seen offering it. Outside, the cold felt cleaner. "They believe him," Rosalind said quietly. "They believe the man with coin," Eamon replied. She shook her head. "No. They believe the version of me that makes their lives easier. The story that costs them nothing." Across the street, saloon doors swung open. Whitford stepped out with two ranch owners. He laughed too loudly, the sound brittle as ice snapping. When he spotted Rosalind and Eamon, the laugh stopped. His posture stiffened. Rosalind stared at him with the calm of someone who has survived deeper storms. "He looks the same as my father did the night before the debt collectors came," she said, standing tall so no one sees the shaking. Eamon studied Whitford with a narrowed gaze. "You read him right. I've known men like him all my life," she murmured. "Men who think refusal makes them small." Eamon almost touched her arm, almost, but pulled back at the last breath. That restraint said more than comfort could have. She saw it. Something softened in her gaze, the faintest thaw. "Let's get home," Eamon said. They climbed into the wagon. The town's eyes followed them until they cleared the last building. Some storms came with snow. Some storms came with whispers. Both could bury a person just as deep. By early light, Rosalind had made up her mind. If she meant to stand on her own feet again, She needed honest work and her own place in the valley Rosalind refused to hide. "If I don't stand in daylight," she said, "I let him decide who I am." So they went door to door. The boarding house was first. Mrs. Klein listened with her hands knotted in her apron, then shook her head before Rosalind finished speaking. "Whitford takes supper here," she said. "I can't risk his temper." Rosalind nodded, quiet, wounded, refusing to show the full bruise. Next came the eating house, a narrow room with a long counter, 2 iron stoves, and the smell of bacon grease hanging thick on the walls. Mrs. Harrow met Rosalind's request with a tight mouth. "I know your situation," she murmured, "but Whitford's men eat here. If I hire you, I'll lose them. I can't afford that." Her regret was real, but fear stood behind it and held the door shut. The dressmaker refused her. The laundry by the creek did too. Every no came wrapped in politeness and cowardice. By the time they reached the wagon, Rosalind's fingers trembled inside her shawl. She pressed them against the wool to hide it, but the tremor remained. "He's poisoning the ground ahead of me," she whispered. Eamon felt something hard twist under his ribs. "You're not poison." "I am to them," she said. "A risk they won't take." He looked at her, a woman thinned by cold, worn by travel, but holding herself upright with quiet dignity. "They're cowards," he said. "They feel like walls," she replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow drifted across the road in thin, restless lines. "We'll see Sheriff Bracken," Eamon said at last. She hesitated. "Law bends toward men like Whitford. Then we'll bend it back." Wind cut low across the fields as they rode. Rosalind's gaze stayed forward, set on a point far beyond the trail. "I see how they look at you now," she said, "like you're less for helping me. Let 'em look. You could still walk away." Eamon's breath tightened, just one beat, but enough that she heard it. "I could," he said, "but I won't." She turned toward him, startled by the firmness in his voice. "When you paused at the door last night," she said, "were you afraid I'd be gone?" He didn't answer quickly. Then, "Yes." The honesty hit her like heat after cold. Her own breath shook. "I haven't had anyone fear losing me in a long time," she whispered. Ahead, the cabin appeared through the pines, small, stubborn, waiting. A storm was coming. Not of snow, but of choices. And the two of them were already standing in it. Sheriff Hal Bracken's office sat near the edge of Alder Ridge, the way a man sits with his back to a wall and his eyes on the door. Coal smoke drifted from the small stove. Wanted posters curled along the plank walls like tired leaves. Eamon told the story straight, no embellishment, no wasted breath. Bracken listened in the quiet way mountain men do, letting every word settle before weighing it. When Eamon finished, the sheriff leaned back and let the chair creak. "Garrett came in here first," he said, louder than needed. "A man afraid of looking weak tends to fill a room with noise." "Whitford fears losing face," Eamon replied. Bracken nodded. "He's built himself a kingdom out there. A man like that don't know how to handle cracks in the walls, especially when the crack's a woman who walked away." He closed the ledger. "I'll call a hearing. Let the valley hear both sides." "Call it," Eamon said. "Miss Hale willing to speak?" "She is." Rosalind stood at the stove when Eamon entered the cabin, stirring a pot of stew, whose steam curled softly in the dim light. Her hand paused mid-motion when she saw him. "Well?" she asked. "There'll be a hearing," he said. "Bracken means to hear it in daylight." She bowed her head a fraction, preparing herself. "Storms don't choose men," she said quietly. "Men choose in storms." Before Eamon could answer, something slid under the door, a pale envelope, too clean for a winter morning. Eamon picked it up. "Yours." Rosalind broke the seal with careful fingers. Her eyes moved across the page, and color drained from her face. He says I owe him money, she whispered. For travel. For shaming his name. Says I signed this. Eamon took the letter. The signature sat neat and perfect. Too perfect. No hesitation, no tremor, not a line like the one she'd used on the wire. He forged this, Eamon said. He can make the valley believe it, Rosalind murmured. A judge won't know my hand from a stranger's. Eamon folded the paper hard along its center. Bracken will. Rosalind stared at the stove, firelight moving across her face in thin strokes. Whitford doesn't want me back, she said. He wants the pride he lost when he cast me aside. Eamon met her eyes. That's his burden, not yours. A gust rattled the shutters like a warning. The storm outside had passed, but another kind of storm, ink, pride, lies, had only begun to gather around them.